laugh at yourself when you make mistakes? I do. And I seem to get into lots of embarrassing situations. There's a little season there where every afternoon after school when I'd pick my kids up, they'd say, "Mum, what did you do today?" And often I had a story to tell them. One of them was I had a book to post. I had an order for a book. And I had a business and I had some rubbish. And I actually posted the book in the rubbish bin at a shopping centre. And of course it was one of those locked bins. And I was like, And if it was just my book, I probably would have just gone and reordered it for them. But it was also a business letter. And I thought, I might get in trouble if that doesn't make it there. So I trudged off to the people in charge, the centre management. I explained my story and she laughed at me, rang the janitor, he laughed at me. We went over, we unlocked the bin and I very carefully rubbed off the tomato sauce and posted the book. Went to New Zealand, not to you, so that's okay. Another day I was driving in the car with Caleb and I thought I was being very intuitive and I said, I think I sense that you're a bit cross with your brother. And he goes, "No, Mum, I'm cross with you." So I just laughed at myself for getting it so wrong, and then we just talked it through, and it was that usual boy thing of him wanting to be a little bit older with a few more freedoms than I was willing to give him at that stage. Parenting is a journey. It's such hard work. It's heart-rending. It's so precious and so maddening. So many oxymorons there. Yet it has been and is truly one of the best parts of my life. So, where did tonight's topic come from? How do toddlers relate to teens? Well, I teach at a Christian school. I've been at Nepean Christian School now for 10 years, and mostly in the high school. I teach great kids. They're sporty, they're athletic, they're academic, they do so well at their singing and their acting and their music. They're just great. I really enjoy them. Yet many of them still make really bad choices. And so I've come to some conclusions about why this is. And these are just my observations, so see what you think. Now, there was one particular year that a friend and I were on a home class, a year 10 home class. And at one point in the year, half our class was on suspension. Let me start with Jack. Jack had been in our school since kindy. His parents were great. They went to church. They were really active members there. The whole family had taken a term off and travelled around Australia and had a great time. Jack comes back to school and 2 mobile phones go missing. One's worth $800. Now, why children have an $800 phone is another topic. The principal rings Jack's parents to say that Jack is suspected of this theft. Jack's dad rants and screams at the principal for 20 minutes. How dare he accuse Jack of doing this thing? 30 minutes later, Jack's dad rings back and says that Jack has the 2 phones. Jack knows what to do, and he knows why he shouldn't steal phones, but he still stole. Why? Let's look at Charlie. Charlie comes from a very similar background, and he stole food from our school canteen. Now, he wasn't very clever because back then we only had canteen days on Monday and Friday, and he was eating canteen food on Wednesday. And he was sharing it with others. He knew he shouldn't steal. He knows why he shouldn't steal, but he still stole the food. Why? Why did he do that? Well, what about Becky? She feels so sad when she fails another test. She knows she can do better. She knows she needs to study. And she knows it's affecting her future choices. She knows all of that, yet she still doesn't study. Why not? Or Steve. He lashes out and hits John after a heated discussion. John falls down and hits his head on the concrete, and his dad threatens to sue. He's so remorseful. He goes and buys him a gift card, and he apologises multiple times. He's genuinely sorry for hitting him. He knows he shouldn't have done it, but he still did it. Why did he do that? These children have been taught the whys and why nots. They have been taught the moral reason why. They feel so guilty, sad and remorseful when they see the results of their choice. Yet they often repeat their behaviour over and over. What's the missing link? Are you thinking it through from your children and your perspective? Do you want them to be those sorts of teens? And do you want to give them the missing link? Well, here it is. We've got the PowerPoint. And the next slide. And the next one. Okay. Now, I've been reading one book for 40 years. And it's not because I'm a slow reader. It's because I really enjoy this book. It's called the Bible. And most nights I'll read a few pages and think, oh, that was nice. And then I go to sleep. But this night I almost leapt out of bed. I was so excited because there's the key. The key is in here. Let's see if we can find it. It says, add to your faith goodness. Now, we all believe in something. Everybody believes in something. You don't have to talk to people for very long to find out what it is they believe in. And to that, we need to add goodness. Now, do you tell your children what to do? Yeah. You're teaching them what's good. Do you tell them what not to do? Yeah, so give yourselves a big tick. You're doing that. You're teaching them all that is good in this world. And do you add to that knowledge? Do you tell them why they shouldn't do that thing or why they should not do that thing? Of course you do. You're brilliant. Another big tick. Actually, you can give yourselves 2 ticks for that one. This is the key. This is the key that's missing. Add to that self-control. And I thought, yes, that's it. We all do it. We all tell them the do's and don'ts. We all give them the whys and the why nots. But it's this next step. If we were focusing on self-control, then they would be able to persevere. What's persevere? Do the right thing over and over and over again. And when they're doing that, they can be kind to others in all sorts of areas, and from there they can love each other. Are you excited? That's it. That's it. Now you can go home. No, don't go home. Next slide, please. Can you think of an area where we don't need self-control? Could you use a little bit more self-control yourself? Yeah? I ate a lot of snakes today. Professional development week, no students, listening all day, lots of red snakes, probably a few too many. So my eating could use a little bit more self-control. All of those areas are really key, aren't they, for our lives, the lives of our children. Yet all of them would be improved by self-control. So as you teach your little ones, whether they're toddlers, whether they're in the tween years or whether they're teens, as you work on self-control, you're going to help them with all of those areas. And is that what you want? Would you love for your children to have self-control in all of those areas? It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Self-control is a beautiful gift that you can give your children. Probably one of the 2 best gifts you can give them. Obviously, you will love them and then give them self-control as well. It's a beautiful thing. Now, parenting issues are complex, and it gets a little bit trickier when we get to the teen years. And self-control is obviously not the only factor that's going to influence how they turn out as young adults. They've got their peer group, you've got family dynamics and changes, you've got dysfunctions, you've got medical conditions, etc., etc. They're all going to contribute to the type of teen and young adult that we can have. There's lots of factors, absolutely. But what we're focusing on tonight is the one factor that as parents we can control, we can influence, and we can have a huge impact on them and actually help them manage a lot of those situations. We can teach our children to put practice before feelings, to do the right thing despite the emotion of the moment. So when your two children come to you crying and one's got blood pouring from his head, what do you say to the other one? Yeah, what did you do? And you get the details. And then at the end of that, do you often say to them, what were you thinking? What we should be asking is, what were you feeling? Because as adults, how many times do you make decisions based on your feelings? It's a lot, isn't it? Because feelings are very loud. Feelings almost demand our attention. And can you teach your child, your tween, or even your toddler to make choices based on what is right rather than that overwhelming emotion at the moment? It's a really high goal, but it's such a beautiful thing to work towards, and it's so lovely when you see them showing that self-control there. It's not taught through the occasional lecture or fun role play or scenario. It's taught in the everydayness of ordinary life. Not every moment of every day, but almost. From toddlers through tweens through teens, we can be laying a lifelong foundation of self-control. In that moment, it's really not about whose turn it is to play on the trampoline or whose turn it is to have the Thomas the Tank Engine plate for morning tea today. It's bigger than that. But through all those little scenarios, all those little situations in the day, you can be laying that foundation of self-control. And that gives purpose and meaning to your day. Now, my Sam, a couple of years ago, so he was about 14, 15, he went through the rolling of the eyes, the huffing and the puffing stage again, when I would just give him simple instructions. Do you have any idea how many times we've gone through that stage with him? Over and over again. So do I just give up and say, oh, that's what he's going to be like? He's just going to be a rolling of the eyes, huffing and puffing young man? No, I keep working on self-control in those moments. I'll say to him, sweetie, you need a few minutes, come back and we'll try that again. And outwardly, I'm very calm. Inwardly, I'm using a lot of self-control to keep it quiet like that. My Emily practiced ballet since she was 3 up until about 16, 17, and she really, really struggled with her ballet teacher. She was an absolute perfectionist and no encouragement. It was just, all the negatives, all the faults, all the things that needed to be working on, and your pliés need to be juicy. And it was hard work. It was hard work for her. And we had a lot of tears, and sometimes I thought, do we need to take a different path for her? But at the end of the day, we persevered. We persevered with that. And Em learnt a lot through that journey and learnt a lot of self-control in terms of holding her tongue and not responding in kind to her teacher. But as she got older, she said, Mum, I think she's actually quite an unhappy person if she can never find something kind or nice to say. So she learnt a lot about emotional self-control as well. My Caleb's now 22 and he's out of home, and it's really interesting when they leave home. You think, oh, what have you taught them? What will they be like? How will it go? And so I went to visit his flat he lives with another young man, and I was expecting the worst. I thought, oh, two young men, both at uni, what's it going to be like? But it was fine. He's the one that keeps it tidy. They cook meat and vegetables most nights, and they have regular inspections, and they've passed every inspection for their unit. And so it's just been lovely to see that foundation of self-control coming to fruition in those years. parenting is hard. It is hard work and it is so tiring. And in that moment, it would be so easy to let things go. The number of times Caleb would regress, he'd be in his room tidiness. It'd be a few months then, it'd be just fine. Then every now and then I'd go in there and it'd be like the piles of clothes on the floor. And I think, oh, what's happened? And it's not so much the clothes, it's the self-control under that, because it's in the little things that you show your self-control. So although it was tiring to be consistent and it was frustrating to be dealing with issues again and again, I kept trying to look past that and think, where am I heading? Where do I want them to be when we're done? So on the next slide, we're going to have a quick look at us and see how are you going to plan your day. So we're all very different, and one of these will most resonate with you. And so when I talk about having just a bit of order to your day, a bit of a pattern, I'm not talking about a military schedule, just have the sense that you know where you're heading in each day. So if you're the melancholy type, you want the day to go right. You like the details, you like the finer things in life, and you're quite in tune with your emotions there. When you have a bit of a pattern for the day will go more right for you. And so that's a win-win for you. If you're that strong leadership type, you'll want things to be running in the correct way, but you're in charge. You're very clearly in charge. And when you have a bit of a pattern for your day, that can happen. The sanguine parents are the ones that come up to me and say, oh, Mel, but I'm just not that type of person. I love to have fun in my day. I love to be spontaneous. They come back to me later and say, Mel, because I have a pattern for my day, a bit of a plan, I actually get more fun now. But we still get to have clean clothes and food on the table as well. And those who are more like myself, a little bit more laid back, I actually like having a pattern for each day because I don't have to think about what comes next. I don't have to make lots of decisions because we just do what we did yesterday and the day before. And my children loved it when they were younger because it just followed. It just followed. So the toddler routine, so just very quickly, we'll just go through each stage. The toddler routine is very structured and parent-directed. Em remembers her toddler years. She says, Mum, I would just play all day. You would just move me around to different spots. So she'd play by herself in a room. She'd have special time with Mummy. She'd have a DVD time, outside play, table time, lunch, nap, and then we'd repeat the sequence for the afternoon. It was all play. She was busy, but it was all play and it was directed by me. But each part of that day, each activity was developing self-control. So from her mind, she was playing. From my perspective, she was learning a lifelong skill, setting that foundation for the next stage. For your school-age children, the day's still fairly structured for your week and a more of a relaxed weekend. So, and think about what's too much or not enough. I had one lady who was doing like a zillion things before they were going off to school. And the poor little one was overwhelmed, and she was overwhelmed as well. So you can't do 6 chores and do some extra tuition and have a music practice and before you head off to school. Keep it simple for them, but just have a little bit of a pattern there. And if you have boys, when they come home from school, feed them lots, then send them outside. Let them run around. They've been so confined for most of that school day. Let them get rid of all that excess energy. You'll get a lot less no's inside and a lot less conflict with their siblings if they get rid of that energy. We'd have a whole hour outside. When it's freezing cold, we would just layer them up. If it was raining, pop their raincoats on and they could play in the puddles and the mud. Let them be boys. Let them run around. So important. They'd come in, get cleaned up, do their chores, do their homework, have dinner, family play, and then their nighttime ritual. Very simple, but it was laying that foundation for self-control. Now, the teen routine is very much self-focused in that they design it themselves with just a few parental guidelines thrown in. So with us, when they were at school still, there was no free computer time during the week, and it was just limited to Saturdays. And all those other issues we discussed with them: music, fashion, dress, leisure activities, friends, movies, etc., etc. With the teens was a lot more talking in terms of the routine. Okay, and on the next slide, we'll see what type of self-control are we dealing with for each age group. So with the toddlers, it's the physical self-control: where and when to play, what not to touch, what they are allowed to touch. It's that physical self-control of their bodies. They really, really, really want to throw that toy across the room because it didn't work. But that physical self-control will say, "Help please, Mum. Can you help me make this toy work?" For that. The school-aged children, we're working on their verbal self-control, how to resolve conflict, how to appropriately express emotion. And that's a huge journey. And I think in a lot of ways that's the tiring stage, because they're always talking, aren't they? They're always talking, so you very rarely get a break from that verbal self-control training, but it's so worthwhile to help them work out their little issues with each other. And then with the teens, it's their attitude. How do they view setbacks? Are you going to have teens that expect everything to go right for them? Are you going to expect them to be the top of every class, to be the top of maths and English? We have parents that expect that from some students. It's just never going to happen. They've got one side of the brain more developed than the other. What is their attitude to relationships? If that boy won't go out with them, are they going to fall apart because they expect everyone to love them? How are they going to respond to rejection? How are they going to manage their finances, their leisure time, their freedoms? Their attitudes to so much in those teen years is going to set that foundation for that next path. Can you help them work that through? Are you going to have a relationship with them so you can be dialoguing on all of these things? And you can. When you have self-control, you can have total disagreements with them and yet still be talking quite calmly with each other. And that's such a beautiful thing. And we'll say, "Mum, I need a few moments now." Or even just last week, she said, "Mum, I can't discuss that right now. It's not a good time for me. I'm really tired, and then we need to discuss this later." She has enough self-control to stop in the middle and be aware of herself, saying, if we go further here, it's not going to end well. And I can respect that and say, "Yep, let's talk again tomorrow morning or the next day. Or how about we go out for dinner or a milkshake and let's chat then." With that, a beautiful thing to have self-control. So let's go back to the teens at my school. They're lovely. They're lovely natured teens with great personalities, and I do love them dearly. Just checking the time there, sorry. I've got 10 more minutes to go. And they're great. They're really good kids, but they just don't have self-control. So when they're little, what are you going to focus on? What's your goal for your children? Are you going to focus mostly on their sporting achievements? Wednesday night, I played a 9-year-old in competitive tennis. He whipped me. 13-3. 9. He's 9. The last 9-year-old I played ended up being the Australian Open Junior champion. So maybe this little one in a few years' time will be up there as well. He plays tennis 25 hours a week. I've only been competing for a year and a half, so I didn't feel too bad. Thought I was going to get 0 games there for a bit. His parents are obviously valuing their sporting achievement. Or do you value academics? We have kids that have tutors for a lot of their subjects because that's what their parents value. There's lots of different things you can value. Do you value experiences? I've got students that I teach that have been on 5 cruises already. been to other countries. Their parents are valuing pleasure and learning about other cultures. We chose to focus on self-control training over academics or other achievements when they were younger. I wanted their hearts to be right because I knew the rest would follow from there. And Emily was quite gifted, quite talented, and people were saying, oh, you know, she needs to do this or this or this. And I just thought, no, if she doesn't have the self-control of her tongue, then I don't care if she writes 100 books or does 100 wonderful things. I want her heart to be kind and her words to be kind. And she's very, very talented. When she was 10, 11, she wrote a whole book, a whole little novel. Only 1 in 100 people ever finish a story that they start. And so we got that published for her, and it's for the 8 to 12-year-old age group. And that was a little reward for her in that to finish, to see that she just sat there on her own, hand wrote back then, this whole little story. My boys play rep soccer, not because they're brilliant athletes, but because they have the self-control to listen to their coaches and learn the new skills. So self-control will follow from those things. What am I most proud of? Not most proud of the fact that they're at uni or they got great ATARs. I'm most proud of the fact of the things that are in their hearts. The fact that they can be respectful with others, that they make good choices, and that they're young men and young women of integrity. Now, there's been lots of things that I haven't been able to control in my parenting journey, and it'll be the same for you. You'll have some smooth bits and then you have some bumpy bits, and you can't control all of that. But you can work on self-control. So let's have a look at the next slide. So where to from here? I do run parenting courses, but I think the church also runs parenting courses, and they'll probably tell you about those after. So we'll go on to the next slide. Possible or impossible? So you've probably got a situation thinking, can self-control help in that situation? And it might look impossible, but I want to encourage you that there's almost always a solution to whatever you're facing. And you may need some help along the way, but almost always the impossible can turn to the possible. So if I've got a piece of paper that's this size, can I cut a hole in it so that it would then pass through my whole body? Would my body fit through a hole that I could cut out of there? Couple of yeses. Does it look impossible? Yeah, but if you cut it in a particular way, and this one I've prepared earlier, so this is just that size. If you cut it in the same way, you will find that it could quite easily pass through my body. And I share that with you to give you hope. Some of you have come because you've got a particular child that's a really hard work. Really hard work. I had a child that said no for 3 whole years. People would say, do you know what it's like to have a tricky child? Oh, yes. He wanted to be the boss, and it took him 3 whole years before he realised that I was going to be his boss. And I kept going because that's something a little one really needs to learn. So if you are facing an impossible situation, find some people who can help you, find the solution and work towards it. But there's no long-term, if you want a long-term lasting change, there's no quick fixes. It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of effort, but you can make changes. Next slide, please. Okay, as Lisa said in the introduction, I want you to think of just one step. What's one child and one behaviour and one change that you could make this week? If this has resonated with you and you think, yeah, I do see that self-control is the foundation. What's one situation that you're really struggling with and you think, yep, that's what I want to work on? Why do I want you to just choose one? Because change is hard. Change is really hard. There was a survey done of people who'd had major heart surgery. Major heart surgery. They almost died, had surgery, now they're alive. And they had to be on a special diet. How many do you think were on that same diet 6 months after that? What do you think? Less than 10%. It's to save their lives. And yet they can't change their diet. Change is hard, isn't it? So choose one thing. Don't overwhelm your child. Don't overwhelm yourself. Choose one thing that you think, yeah, I want to see, how can I develop self-control in that area? And if you've got the little ones, and even through to the school-aged children, the books will help you because it gives you lots of scenarios of how to use everyday activities to teach self-control. And there's a whole chapter on it. Well, if this happens, what consequence can I give them? What's a creative result of that choice that will help them move towards self-control? Don't need punishment. We need consequences so they realise, oh, if I choose this, this is what happens. I choose this, this is what happens. Because we want them to learn, don't we? We want to love them, care for them, be gentle with them. We want them to work towards self-control. Next slide, please. And yeah, do it for at least a week. And then, yeah, you think, oh, that's happening. Now choose something else and work on that. So this is really important. Write out, what can you imagine? What would you like your 18-year-old son to be like? What would you like your 18-year-old daughter to be like? List the qualities that you would like. It's just so important to know where you're going. So even on those hard days, you think, this is worth it because I know where I'm going. I'm going over here with that. For my last birthday, Caleb wrote on my card, Mum, I really enjoy hanging out with you and still beating you at tennis, which is only true sometimes. I can sometimes still beat him there. But that's such a joy. One of the goals was I wanted to be good friends with my kids. I wasn't friends with them when they were little. I was their mum. But now that they're big, now we've got the friendship, and that's a beautiful thing to my heart. So really encourage you. There's something really powerful about writing down where you're heading. And I think there's one more slide. Yeah, and enjoy them. Just enjoy them. When they get to young adults, they're very different to what you expect in that they're still their own personality. And there's some things that you just, I was determined that my daughter wouldn't be a picky eater. She's a picky eater. So there's a few things like that are inherent in them, but there's just, they turn out far more wonderful than you're expecting. So look towards the goal, think long-term, what's going to work long-term for them. So food for thought. Because if my bedroom is a disgusting mess, do I have any authority to tackle my children's mess? No. If I'm eating junk food and watching TV all day, can I talk to my children about their TV habits or their food? So there's a little bit of integrity there, isn't there? Do I have to be perfect before I train my children? No. Have I got it all together? Have I got perfect self-control? Of course not. Do I get angry at them sometimes? Do I raise my voice and say things I shouldn't? Of course I do. I have my bad days as well as my good days. What we're wanting to do is we're on this path and we're wanting them to head towards this path. And we need to model, especially when they're little, it's our model that is the most powerful parenting tool that we have. 80% of our parenting is simply who we are, which is comforting in one way. It's not, we don't need a lot of stuff, do we? But it's a bit scary in another way. They're watching us all the time. They're observing us, and they know exactly what's important to us. We've just had a little financial period that was quite tight there, and my daughter said to me, "Mum, you're always going on about that." I said, "Oh, am I?" And it was nice for her to be able to say to me, "Oh, I wasn't being as trusting as I could that we were going to get through that period." And so that was lovely that she could show me where I was needing to show a little bit more self-control and be a bit more trusting in an area. So yes, we have to be able to model what we're wanting, but don't think you have to be perfect before you can do that. Someone said to me, well, I've got just a dreadful temper, so I can't talk to my child about his temper. You can, and you need to, but you're probably going to be journeying, that's a good word, isn't it, together probably quite closely. As you work on your anger, your child's going to be following along as well. Whereas some other things, you've worked it out. You think, yeah, if I do eat regularly, breakfast, lunch and dinner, and I don't graze on junk food all day, I feel a lot healthier and I've got a lot more energy. So you might be here and your little one's back here demanding food all the time. So that's okay as well, but you're heading in the same journey. What happens when you do fail? So I've had moments with my children where I've spoken to them in a dreadful tone, or I've said some things that were just not kind. I go back to them and I say, I am so sorry. What I said to you was so unkind, or my tone wasn't very nice. Will you please forgive me? And they do. They do. And you're also modelling how to respond when you fail, and they're learning to trust you because you made a mistake and you were honest enough to admit it. And it's interesting, even parents who have addictions and really struggle with themselves, if they could be honest with their children and apologise often, that really means a lot to the kids. Obviously, you need to follow that through with your actions as well. So, yeah, lots for us to work on as well. And again, that's why I said just choose one thing. So if you really struggle with your general tidiness in your home, but that's something you'd really like to work on, as you work on it yourself, then you can help your child in that area. When the house is relatively tidy, you can move on to another area that you're wanting to work on. So I've got some questions here, and I'm sure these people asked them about their neighbours' children. And the first one was how to manage say an 8 to 10-year-old boy who's got a negative attitude when he doesn't get his own way. And I'll answer that part and then we'll deal with the second part first. When they don't get their own way, who are they thinking of? Themselves. And it's because they're thinking of what's best for them in their little world from their little 8-year-old perspective. And you're a little bit older and you're a little bit wiser, and so you've got to, it's kind and loving to say no sometimes, isn't it? That's not a helpful thing for you to be doing, or there's a reason that you can't do that, or you shouldn't go in that direction. Because I'm older, I'm wiser, and because I love you, we're going to head this way. And they respond to your decision, don't they, in a negative way. So what are you going to do with that? In the moment, not a whole lot. When you're in an argument with somebody and you're right, are you open to listening in that point? Not really, especially when you're right. And why not? Because there's a lot of emotion there, isn't it? And so you need to have just that level of self-control, that level of respect in your home where you need to say, we need to talk about this when you're ready. And for us, it was always you go and sit on your bed, and then when you're ready, you can come back and we'll talk this through. Because in that moment, it's not very effective. Your most effective parenting moments are going to be times of non-conflict. And so you want to have most of those, if you can. What do you do in that moment? Because they're 8, 9, 10, you need to talk it through. Don't just lecture them. They hear the first 3 words, then they tune you out. Ask them lots of questions. What did you do? Why is it wrong? What will you do next time? How are you going to make it right? And you say they're the 4 questions that you ask and get them to verbalise it. If there's a lot of emotion, it's taking them forever to come back and to be ready to talk it through, we would send them to their room with just a little book, and they'd have to write out those answers. And then they could come back and then dialogue on those. And my boys in particular were like, oh, Mum, very happy to chat, because I didn't want to sit there and write for 5 minutes. So, and it was because it was the same thing each time. And then the tricky thing, what's your consequence going to be? And it's not punishment, it's guidance. What is going to help them make the right choice next time? And sometimes it's a loss of freedom, or a loss of a privilege, or it's a positive thing. Hey, you responded really well then. What's going to be the positive consequence for that? Does that make sense? Because what we're wanting heart change. Not just wanting a behaviour. We're not wanting a little robot. We're wanting a little 8-year-old boy that can have the self-control to say, I really disagree with that. But I'm going to say, yes, Mum, yes, Dad, and I'm going to follow through because I know you're older, I know you're wiser, and I know that you love me. Now, what did you do? So, I responded in a bad way with a negative attitude. So it's the what, then the why. Why is that wrong? I showed disrespect, I wasn't obedient, blah, blah, blah. How are you going to make it right? What are you going to do to make that situation right? And what will you do next time? So, for example, if my 8-year-old responded negative to me, he's showing me an unkindness, I would have him do something kind to me, like bring the clothes in off the line or put the washing away or put the dishes away or something like that. And then get him to verbalise or write out what would he do next time to help him own it. Now, the second part of the question was, if this is in a separated family, and that's a whole nother ball game, and that's unfortunately so common, and I've had some dreadful situations that I've worked through with little ones where they spend half the time with one parent, half the time with the other parent, and totally different standards, and often opposite, because often there's a lot of tension in those situations. You're in charge of your time with your child, and you do what you can in that time with your little one. And don't compare yourself to someone who has their child all week, or someone who doesn't have those competing values happening. Your child will learn that you mean what you say, that you're older and wiser, and that you love them, and that you have boundaries because you care for them. It will take them a long time. They might be late teens before they look back and say, thanks, Mum. Thanks, Dad. You weren't the Santa Claus parent. You weren't the fairy godmother. You didn't give me all that stuff. But you taught me self-control. You showed me true love, and thank you. It's very, very hard. It's very hard. But I've been doing this journey for a while now, and I've seen a number of people who've come through the journey as a single parent, and they're reaping the fruit now, where the kids are seeing the difference between the two families and are thanking the parent that did have the firm boundaries, that stood strong with that. Just in the break, talking to a lady that said, but no one else is teaching their little one self-control. I feel like the only one in the whole world. We do have little groups for mums, obviously, sorry, dads, where you can get together with other parents once a month who are doing those things. But that's why it's so important. Where are you going? Where are you going? I had a lot of fun with my kids as we were growing up, but my focus was self-control training, and I don't regret that, because I knew where I was going, and I knew what I did today would influence that. So stay strong, whatever your situation, do what you can with the time you've got. Others come to me and say, but I have to work full-time. I'd love to do all of this stuff, but I work full-time. Do what you can with the time that you have. It will take longer, but your little one will learn. Oh, this is what Mum values. Mum values the things in my heart, the things that are going to last, and they will follow that as they get older. Another question here was, how do I teach my child to accept that they aren't going to be great at everything? When they're wanting to win every race, to come first in every test and get the first piece of cake at the birthday party, who are they thinking of? Themselves. We almost have to fight to help them think of other people, don't we? Because the world tells them, look after yourself. You're the best. You're the number one. And so It's going to be bit by bit and right from young, teaching them to think of other people is the foundation of that. So right from when they could crawl, I would have them helping me with some chores. So they would get the little face cloth and they would crawl and put it on the bed. And they loved helping. And as they could walk, they would toddle around and, take their plastic cup from the table to the sink. Right from the start, they were serving the family. And as they got older and older, they did more and more of that. So that was the start of helping them think of others. And then as things happen in life, you need to help them think of the other person. So they're going to the birthday party. Whose day is it today? Well, it's Timmy's birthday. How can we make Timmy feel happy? And let's let Timmy have the first piece of cake because it's his birthday today, and get them to be happy for each other. If you have more than one child, you can really work on that in your family unit to be excited when something good happens to the sibling rather than think, oh, well, why didn't I get a prize at school today? Or why hasn't my team won at soccer this morning? And we created that culture of enjoying and celebrating each other. And it went to the other extreme because, they'd come back with, a little scribble on a piece of paper and they'd go, oh, Mum, we've got to celebrate that picture that they drew, because we would go to McDonald's and being the big spenders, we would buy the 30-cent ice cream cones as a celebration. But they loved that. And that was the norm for them. They're not going to be great at everything. And that's okay. They need to find their thing that they're good at and enjoy that, and learn to celebrate others being good at those things as well. I teach maths at school, which I know some of you love, and I teach it to the bottom students, the special needs kids, the kids that have the behavioural issues, who don't enjoy school at all. And I have this challenge, and I love it, of helping them enjoy maths. And if they get 50%, I'm excited. But for some of them, that's a great achievement. Others get other marks. But then we have sports day, and some teachers complain because we're not having lessons that day. I love sports day because it's often my kids that shine on the sports field. That's their thing, and that's their day to shine. And school musical, the school band, other events, they find their little space and they enjoy that. So help them find something that they're really good at, but then think about others for other things. Okay, I'm just going to pause here. I'm going to give you the 6 common roots of parenting problems. So think of your question, think of your issue, and see if it fits into one of these 6 categories. Because when I do the email counselling, I'll always send back a whole list of questions, and often it's these, and often from there we can work out what's really happening in this situation and then hence get to the root of it. So number 1 is if there's a lack of oneness between mum and dad, and so that's when one is soft and one is a little bit firmer, and there's actual conflict in front of the children. Now that's going to happen. You're not going to be the same. You're going to come from different backgrounds and you're going to have different ideas, and dads tend to be a little more soft on their girls and a little harder on their boys, just a bit of a trend there. And so, but in front of the kids, you need to try and work out, okay, what's going to be our standard in this situation? And when they're little, you can just pop them in their cot and work out, well, we'll do this, da-da. As they get older, don't be scared to say, guys, you need to go and sit on your bed. We're going to work out what we need to do here. Because they can wait a few minutes. It doesn't hurt anyone. They can calm down. You can calm down, have a little discussion, think rationally, and then decide. It's not going to happen all the time, but if most of the time you can be together, then that's really going to help your child. Lack of structure and routine is number 2. If there's no predictability about meal times, bedtimes, learning times, play times, time for chores, etc., etc., what happens is the child becomes wise in their own eyes because they feel like they're making all the choices for the day. And then when you want them to nap or you want them to do something for you, that's when you have a big clash because they're like, hey, I'm in charge, who are you? So think that one through. Do you have a bit of structure and routine? And I'm not saying stay home all day, every day. That's not right. But a bit of structure, and particularly that bedtime routine. That can be similar each night. That's really good. Number 3, too many verbal and physical freedoms. So do you allow them to argue, complain, whine, talking back? They're all examples of verbal freedom. The physical freedoms are doing things without asking. So, oh, Mum, I'm just grabbing a drink from the fridge. They're choosing that as opposed to asking you if they can do that. And if they're kicking, hitting, and things like that. You'll get a lot of the issues will probably come from that one, number 3. Number 4 is lack of consistency. Do we say what we mean and mean what we say? It's an issue of integrity, but also, does your no mean no? Or does it mean, oh, maybe? Or if you ask another 10 times, I'll say yes in exasperation because I just want you to go away. If you are consistent, calm and consistent, you'll see a huge change in behaviours. I've seen almost impossible kids turn around within a week because mum or dad finally decided, you know what? I've had enough. When I say no, I'm actually going to mean no, and I'm just going to follow through with the consequence. It doesn't really matter so much about what that consequence is, just the fact that mum and dad has put their foot down and said, yep, I'm going to be consistent now, and the child goes, whoa, and they're actually happier and more peaceful once they have their little explosion because they can be a child and just play. And number 5 is a lack of prayer and trusting God, and that's from a biblical perspective, that God is in control and God can help you in practical ways. And number 6 is very interesting. It's selfishness, but it's of the parents. A lot of parents want certain behaviours in their children, but they don't want to put the effort in to get there. I can't play tennis every night if I have little children because I need to be there to get them through their night routine. I can't be doing a zillion hours of exercise every week if I'm going to be modelling to my children self-control in everyday issues. I had to put some things on hold for a little while in that season. I love to do patchwork. I made them each a quilt for their beds, and that's been about it for the last 10 years. It's not saying you can't do some of those things, but it's balance and it's priorities. So am I willing to put the effort in to get the fruit from it? The child's not my whole world, but they're a big portion of it. It's going to take a lot of time to get to those results. So it's not an exhaustive list, but it's just 6 things to consider. So, now is there a roving mic? Oh yes, there is. So if you want to raise your hand, we can take a few questions. And as I said, your neighbour's children can be the topic of your question.
Sorry, wow, that's hard. Should you persevere with one thing? You know how you said work on one thing each week. Should you persevere on that one thing until it succeeds, or is that going to just I want to persevere and put my foot down forever, but then my 4-year-old will put her foot down, and it just turns into a big battle of wills. So do you persevere with one thing each week, and if it's not working, come back to it later, or do you just persevere for months and months until it gets done?
That's such a good point. I'm so glad you raised it. When you say, I'm going to make a change, your little one's going to react to that. And so it's not going to be pleasant for those first 3 to 5 days, is it, as they respond to this new way of being things. And the books explain a gentle way of introducing things. And so a big part of it is if you've got your pattern set up on a chart, so it's a visual thing for them, and so this is what's going to happen. Because you want a foundation of order and predictability before you start working on any heart things. So if you're thinking, yeah, I want self-control, yeah, this sounds good, I know where I'm heading, I know what I want my 18-year-olds to look like, this gels with me, this is where I'm heading, start there. Start there. Just whatever age they are, get an age-appropriate pattern for the day. Not every single day, 3 or 4 days of your week. This is pretty much what we're doing. And give that a go. So you're going to have the explosion 3 to 5 days, and then give it a week. And by the end of that week, you'll think, yeah, most of our days look like this. This is great. Now, what's one behaviour? So we're having huge issues with playtime. You know, the toys go everywhere, there's a big mess, and then there's a big battle for packing up. Let's just work on that. So non-conflict time, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to pack up, this is how we're going to play, da-da-da. Talk it all through, practice it, work on that for a week. And if at the end of the week you think, yeah, we're doing okay with that, I want to do that for another week. That's all I'm going to focus on, is getting this part of the day working well. At the end of the second week, you go, hey, most days it's not a big issue anymore. We're actually working this through. Most days they pack up quickly and they don't make the big mess. Now what's my second part of the day? Oh, outside play is just a disaster. Okay, let's work on that. Because you're never going to get it perfect, and so you just want to keep moving through. And then what happens? You think, yeah, I've worked on all these things. Toys, playtime again, we're working on this again. It sort of goes in waves a bit. But the second time, you'll think, oh, that was only a couple of days and now we're back on track. And then outside play, disaster again, but again it'll be smaller. So when you're first implementing it, it's going to look like this. But then the next bit, it's a bit more like this. You think, yeah, revisiting all of those things, but for a lesser extent. Does that make sense? And that's real, isn't it? And there are times, like there are weeks where I think, oh, I'm just going to go back to the basic pattern and not have any real focus. Just back off for me. I need a bit of a breather. Let's just get through the day. Okay, I've got a bit more energy this week. What's one thing I can get back to working on? Just with all of that, what do you get more excited about? Saying no all day, or teaching something really positive and really good and really lasting in their little hearts? So for me, it would be like, oh, actually this week it's going to be about patience. And so I think I'm going to make them wait this week. I'm going to teach them how to be patient. So every time they'd ask me something, I'd say, yes, sweetie, I'll be there in just a moment. Can you show patience? When they were little, they'd have to put their little hands together and be quiet. And I'd be like, 10 seconds. I'd say, oh, great, patience. You showed such patience in your heart. And then I would help them. And then the next little thing, I'd make them wait maybe 30 seconds and then a minute. And that just added value to my day. And it was fun for me as well, because I think, how far can I get them to wait? But they're learning something as well. So as you train, don't always just think, what don't I want? Keep, like 90% of the time, I think, what do I want? What do I want to see? And build on those. So is that okay? Yeah. Oh, where's the microphone? Sorry.
You mentioned about often there can be one firmer parent and one kind of fun parent. Mm. In your opinion, if there's the firmer parent and the funner parent, if we put it that way, yeah, can the parent with less boundaries, do you think that can have an effect? Can that ruin the work that the firmer parent is doing? Like, it's always best that the parents are working together, yeah, or is it okay to kind of go, yeah, that's fun parent time? Yeah. And leave it at that? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of in moderation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had a season where my husband was studying at night, and so he was home for an hour, like 3 nights a week. And I had 3 little ones, and it was like I needed a break from them. And I thought, well, what do? Do I continue with my routine, or I just give them to him? And so I gave them to him, and he would, rumbles and sock walls and chaos and mess everywhere. But I loved it because I was just in the kitchen, got my kitchen tidy. I had a mental break from them. He'd go off to his course, and I'd be left with this disaster. But that was lovely for them because they had daddy time, and they were fine. As soon as daddy went, they went, oh, it's just mummy now. And they'd trot off to their bedrooms, and I'd let them read and calm down, and then I would go to them and do the bedtime prayers and things. So yeah, absolutely. There's seasons for that and there's times for that. But it's those big things that you say, yeah, we're in agreement here. But yeah, and one parent's going to have more fun ideas, and yeah. And I did do fun things with them as well. You know, when it was raining, they loved going through the puddles and getting muddy and playing in mud. And, you know, sunny days would say, let's go to the park for outside play. And we did lots of that as well. But generally, the person that's with them most tends to be a bit firmer with them. But yeah, I won't say what I was going to say. Yep, next question. I think what I will say is that I think with two parents, it is good to have variety, and it is good to learn from each other, not think, oh, well, we always have to have fun or we always have to be strict. It is good to have that balance. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in having two parents for a child. Yeah.
Have you got any tips on a 4-year-old with a very short attention span? So in our cases, you know, where we've got a 4-year-old and we've got a 2-year-old, so they're both girls, they have conflict, one wants the doll, the other one won't give it up, whatever it may be.
Yeah,
So one will fight, push the younger one off the lounge, whatever, and you're trying to have that serious conversation about, no, you shouldn't do that, and what are the consequences and everything else.
Yeah.
And within a couple of seconds, it's smiles and, you know, oh, I love you, Daddy. You know, wander off and no, come back here. This is serious. Sit down. So
yeah. So a big part of their self-control training is that focusing and concentrating and sitting still at a task, because naturally they want to flit from thing to thing, which creates a lot of chaos, a lot of mess, and it's not helping their self-control. And so from the books, that's why you have a bit of a pattern for the day, because every part of that is developing self-control. So it's the self-control to play in their room by themselves. It's the self-control to play outside for the time that you determine. And it's the self-control to sit at a table and do those table activities, often the pre-learning for school activities, and to actually sit at that, because normally they'll last a couple of minutes, but you want to gradually extend that time. And so with my little ones, we'd start with 3 to 5 minutes. It was really short. Then the timer would go off or the music would play and I'd go, oh, lovely sitting time, well done. Now we're off to the next activity, whatever. So you're just going to gradually stretch out that time. So by the time they were 18 months, they were sitting for 20, 30-minute blocks, which people say to you it's impossible. It's not. If you start small and build up, they can do those sorts of things with that. And there's a whole chapter on the whole sibling friendship thing, so you can work through that as well. So I'm very happy to answer your personal questions, because I know that some of you have babysitters to get to. Can I just finish with this? We're a sporting family. We just love watching sport, playing sport. And it's really hard when teams are being chosen if you're chosen last. And that never happened to me all through school, because I was quite sporty. And I was a good captain. I'd often choose people who weren't sporty so they would feel included. But it was just a couple of years ago where I just had a bunch of friends over, about 20 of us, we were all playing soccer. And I got chosen last. And I was so offended, because I said to my boys, I've watched you play for 15, 20 years. I know how to play. Why didn't you choose me? Anyway, I think we lost that day, but it doesn't matter. God has chosen you and only you to be the parent of your children. And I know some days you want to send them back, don't you? Some days it's 8 o'clock in the morning and you'd like to send them back to bed. Some days are really hard, and some seasons are really hard, and some of you have those extra challenges of doing it on your own, or with learning difficulties, or with physical difficulties, or medical difficulties. It's hard work. It's a hard road. But never forget that you are the best person for that job. And God may have blessed you with 1 child, 2 children, or like my friend, 11 children. And that's okay. He's given you that. And it doesn't mean you have to do it alone. There's some great resources out. I know this church here, for some of you who are local, is a great support, and they've got things to help you in your parenting journey. So it is hard work. It is. But remember your goal and work towards it, because what you're doing today, whether they're toddlers or the tweens or they're moving towards the teen years, you can have an influence. You can enjoy the teen years just as you can enjoy the toddler years and those middle years. And you can have beautiful young adults that you're proud of that you enjoy and that you call your friend.